just for people who've joined quite recently, so what we're going to talk about here is how we have a bunch of awesome panelists here, and we're going to talk about how you can, what are the things that you need to take care of when you're developing managed packages or basically doing any sort of application building inside of Salesforce. So with me, I have Vikram Middha, who is a certified Salesforce architect. He works for Make Positive. Vikram is one of the few architects that are based out of India, and he's being just amazing in setting the gun for Make Positive. And our other panelist is Daniel Peter. Daniel, I don't think I need to introduce Daniel here. So Daniel is a Salesforce MVP, a Bay Area user group organizer, and he is a Salesforce practice lead. He heads a company called Robots and Pencils. So I'm pretty sure most of you here know Daniel just because of his awesome presence in the Salesforce ecosystem. So what we will be talking more, so just to confirm, Vikram, Daniel, if you're able to hear me, just say aye.
Yes, Prashanth, I can hear.
I can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, great. All right, so just to set the agenda, guys, so today we'll be talking about, again, working with managed packages, best practices, and we'll leave the last 10 minutes for an awesome round of Q&A. So before we get started into the actual content, well, so Vikram, Daniel, why don't you just take a minute to just introduce yourself to the crowd that we have here. I'm pretty sure we have people outside of the Salesforce ecosystem as well. So Daniel, why don't you go first?
Sure. Yeah, the robots and pencils role is new to me, but actually I've spent a lot of time as a Salesforce ISV at Canandy building managed packages. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart. I've been through a lot of the challenges and come up with some good tips for folks. So I'm really excited to share knowledge today.
Awesome. Thank you. And so are we to learn from you. Vikram, why don't you go next?
Everyone, I'm Vikram. I work for Make Positive. I work from India location, and I am one of the 2 certified technical architects based in India. Close to 15 years of experience, and from last 10 years, I have been spending my days and nights in small to large implementation in Salesforce, and looking forward to share a few of my good experience with you all today.
All righty. All right, so let's get started with the first question I have for our both panelists here. Now, in any kind of development, let it be managed package development or building just an application, working on any kind of a user story that you have. One of the core challenges that developers, business analysts, or product managers like me face is the changing requirements from business. So, and I'm pretty sure when you're building a managed package, which is very tightly controlled, there would be a few other challenges. For example, in terms of how do you manage the backlog, or how do you serve a managed package to multiple customers? So how does this work, Daniel? How did you handle this in Canandy?
Yeah, well, first, conceptually, I think it's good to understand that you don't want to change things too much on a customer if they're running their business off of your software. So the Salesforce Managed Package environment is kind of geared towards that. For instance, let's say you deliver a product, the customer builds a customization on top of that, and now the requirements change. If you were to change the product out from underneath them, that would break their customization they built. So, it's a bit like changing the tires on a car while it's moving. And I think although the managed package environment creates a challenge for developers, it basically restricts what they can change after it's been released. That there's actually some good, some safety in that. So I just wanted to point that out. No matter how you're architecting your packages, whether it's the latest greatest DX or the old way of building packages, you do want to be careful about breaking your existing customers' functionality because they are running a business off that version. So basically, I think anytime you're doing changes, keep that in mind. and you're going to want to break up your packages if you can, to where things that aren't changing very often maybe are in one place. We'll talk about package architecture more later, but try to separate, and at the very other end of the extreme, the things that are constantly changing, maybe you don't even want to put those in your package. Maybe that's custom code that the customer owns.
Got it. So what you're saying is, essentially saying is, have a vision in terms of what you want the package to look like, even before you start developing, so that you do not make too many changes.
Yeah, changes are painful. Just in general, people don't like change. It's ramp up to get them new to something they're not used to. But in the software world, we sometimes call these breaking changes. These actually will break things. So I think that we do need some controls over how much we can change software out from underneath people, especially when it's their business counting on it. So. We'll get more into the specifics, but I just wanted to talk sort of conceptually. I just wanted to mention that.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Thank you for that insight, Daniel. Now, Vikram, just from a perspective of a non-managed package, I would really like to understand, AutoRABIT being a startup, I'd really like to understand, how do you manage the constant barrage of requirements that come in when you're at a customer's place?
Okay, so managing the requirements in a normal implementation is actually a bit different from the managed package. Simple scenario, we are doing implementation for and it's a simple implementation. They have a single business unit, Sales Cloud, Service Cloud. So you create set of requirements, build that. So this is a best case scenario. You have a set of plans which you have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. Nothing is there to divert you from that. The problem is in when you are building something, some app or some implementation for a customer where they're already using Salesforce, people business units, and you keep getting requests. They have a BAU changes, right? Coming in, and you have your as a partner, you are a project for them. That's the problem comes in, and every requirement is important. They want to get everything done yesterday. So the key here is to have a very strong change management and a release process. So theoretically, it looks like it looks like you should have a team of stakeholders who can prioritize the requirement and forward it to the product team who are. If this prioritization is not there, after a few months, seen that the complete implementation goes into the mess. It's really important to have the change management team in process who actually can look the coming in, and they push back the requirements to the business. They are system. They understand the vision of where the business is going to. So that actually entity make sure that they are only to the team is relevant to the near future, deliver value to the business. And release management, as I said, is really important to continuously deliver. Strong CI process you have, a source control process you have a continuous process of delivering from your dev environment to production as streamlined as possible.
Great, Vikram. That's actually that's beautiful. So when you said requirements need to be done, requirements are important, and everybody wants them done yesterday, you had my heart, man. So that's really great insight. So let's move on to the next topic. So we kind of brushed on this a little bit. Development. How different is the development of an in-house application? Let's say, for example, I'm making some kind of customization on top of my Sales Cloud or Service Cloud. How different is it from building a managed package? Daniel, would you care giving us some of that insight?
Sure. So from a developer standpoint, it's going to be, I would say, about 95% the same. So a lot of overlap between building an app for a managed package versus in-house in terms of, your Apex, Visualforce, Lightning skills. A few small considerations, the biggest of which is probably the namespace. So developers building in-house may have never worked with a namespace before. So now they're typing this namespace, double underscore in front of all their fields, their objects. That's the main difference. But I think it introduces a whole new, perhaps, job role within an organization. So processes around CI, CD, release management, versioning, the nuances of package architecture. I think this is the biggest difference between packaging and in-house, but I think it makes a lot of sense to have that be maybe a separate role within the organization. So maybe the developers aren't doing much different either way, but it introduces this new role for a person or a team that handles these nuances around the CI/CD portion of it.
Got it. So, Vikram, do you have anything to add here?
Yes, I would say that I echo what Daniel has said. But I think that to add on to that, I think building in-house application is a bit more relaxed than building a managed package in terms of the future impact of it. Because as Daniel said, right, any changes to the managed package you need to be very careful of the future impacts. But with the app here, the normal implementation, when you're continuously doing the builds here, it's not really that concerning because it's only for one customer. Packages for multiple customers and it can impact many of them. But the normal implementation is in-house implementation is only for the one customer, and you have the liberty to go back and roll it back. As compared to managed package where the modifying the design or anything is not that simple.
Yep, got it. It's good. So that's a good insight. And so one of the common things that of Salesforce developers, people who want to make App Exchange products, one of the core question that they have is how do you handle namespaces when you're working on a distributed team? Say, for example, if you're a team that is serving a product on a scale of Atlassian, and you're around the globe and you're spread across the globe, and you're trying to manage a single namespace. How do you come about dealing with namespaces, Daniel?
Yeah, this is a very interesting topic in the Salesforce world. I think what you'll see some shops doing is they may have developers developing for a managed package in a traditional dev org, perhaps with no namespace. And then as this thing moves, through different integration environments and ultimately to the managed package, different either dummy namespaces or the final namespace will get added. So the platform is fairly smart in the fact that if you retrieve code from one org and deploy to another, it will add that namespace in or change that namespace, but it's not 100% predictable. And sometimes what can happen is you build something without a namespace, you rely on the platform to add it, but perhaps a common one is maybe your JavaScript code is not expecting there to be a namespace and one gets added and the platform's not smart enough to catch that. So now you are basically pointing, a null pointer exception type of error, pointing to something that doesn't exist. So I think what we're seeing is a move with Salesforce DX. So traditionally you could only have one namespace in an org. And this was the source of a lot of the problems. You would maybe prefer to have that packaging org namespace in your dev org, but you couldn't use it. So you'd use no namespace or a dummy org. But I think with DX, we're seeing more, I'm hoping we'll move in the direction where the namespaces are very explicit. So maybe all the developers can be having that same namespace in their org. They can all be, putting that namespace right in the Apex, right in the Visualforce, right in the JavaScript Lightning components. So there's like no gray area. And, as we all know, it's more expensive to fix bugs, after they've been released. And I think the old world, some of these bugs wouldn't show up until the very end when you were packaged. But if we're all using the namespaces in our dev orgs, you'll catch these things before you even perhaps commit them to version control. So I think that's mostly what I have to say about this. It's kind of a strange animal, but it's getting better with Salesforce DX.
Absolutely right. So I do concur on that with the second generation packaging, which, by the way, I have a question on, is something that will kind of ease make it easy for developers in order to have multiple namespaces, have versioning across packages and stuff like that. So then as a follow-up question, one of the things that people keep talking about is, many teams or many architects have kind of developed their own solution in terms of a prefix manager, where before migrating code, they retrieve the code into a ETL system perhaps, and use a prefix manager, or this could be internal, natively inside of the Salesforce org itself. They use the prefix manager in order to change the namespaces. Have you ever come across such a kind of an implementation?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different categories of that. I think one of them is kind of dynamically introspecting your org and finding out the namespace. And a lot of folks will do this by, say, querying for a piece of metadata that only exists in their namespace, and then finding out what the namespace is. Of course, there's some challenges with this. For instance, what if the customer creates a custom piece of metadata with the exact same name? Now it might break that functionality because it might pick the wrong namespace. But that's one sort of nice way to do it, because there's no process involved. It just works on the Salesforce platform. You're not having to write scripts or external tools. But yeah, these external tools, I think they work pretty good. It's just one more step. But yeah, I mean, I've heard of companies even having to like manually go into their packaging org and make some tweaks, like changing something in a formula sometimes because the namespace is wrong or things like this. So that static way of doing it is sort of moving the error from at the time you're building the package, it's moving it to that time instead of having it sort of at runtime. So you're sort of just shifting the problem around from, internally with your tools and processes to sort of leaving it up to discovering it at runtime and any anomalies that might happen then. But bottom line is either way you do it, these things kind of work, but there's some potential issues you're introducing into your product.
Yeah, got it. So essentially, plan it before you break it.
Yeah, try your best.
All right. So, Vikram, let me ask this question to you, because one of the when you're building any application, you want to get your framework right. You want to get your framework right so that you can support multiple sort of integrations. You want to have new things added, legacy code removed, and stuff like that. So what are some general patterns to create highly flexible and scalable solutions?
Yeah, this one's for me to start. Yeah, so this is where DX is getting much more exciting. So we could do some of this stuff all along, but DX is making it a lot nicer to do. So, traditionally, you might think of like a monolithic package. We're putting all this code in there, and perhaps there's some code that you want to use in another package that's got some overlap. So you might make another monolithic package, and you might have some copied code from one to another. So now you're kind of maintaining core functionality, core services, like in two places. And then you get into these areas of dependencies. With monolithic packages, you don't really think about these too much because everything could be dependent on everything and it's all in the same package. It doesn't matter. But what we're seeing now is more, I think, an architecture emerging of more of loose couplings between packages. So there's some pretty exciting things for this. Dependency injection. Maybe you've heard about folks sort of at runtime, you figure out what pieces to pull in to your application. Also, with packaging too, with Salesforce DX, we're also getting into really looking at our dependencies. So, there's a new feature of the tooling API people are starting to play with to map out their dependencies. So you might see people organizing their packages kind of in a bottom-up approach, where these core things that don't depend on anything are like sitting in a base package, and now you build on top of that so things can refer to shared data models, shared services in your base package, which maybe doesn't change that often. And then you can kind of even swap out pieces of the extension packages. So I think much more, we're seeing more thinking about package architecture. We're seeing untangling dependencies so you can swap out the pieces you want easily. We're seeing sort of runtime resolving implementing an interface between the packages that gives them a common language. We even got some new Apex features for this, so you can write them custom. But we might even see more this is pretty exciting. We might see modularity and communication between different ISV packages even. So I think some of the worlds of monolithic are kind of breaking down, and obviously for flexibility, having it be modular, having these things be loosely coupled, shared components, shared services. These are the kinds of exciting things we're getting now with Salesforce DX.
I totally agree, Daniel. In terms of the second generation packaging, I think it is one of the most exciting things that customers or Salesforce customers are going to adopt in 2019. Vikram, on the same topic, I know that you're also pretty excited about the whole Salesforce DX. But one of the core, and I'm going to go on a tangent here, one of the core requirements for Salesforce DX or the package architecture to function is to break down the monolithic code. So if you have an existing implementation, and let's suppose that it is a very mature implementation which is running for about the last 10 years, what are some of the things that you need to look out for in order to decompose your monolithic code base to support the package architecture?
Okay, so let's talk about the problem that comes in usually in these kind of scenarios. So if it's that long implementation going on for the years, what could have happened here is there must be a lot of different partners who have worked on this implementation. The in-house team of that customer, they must have making a lot of BAU changes. This, in most of the cases, this introduces a lot of duplicate and bad code. We call it as technical debt. So this actually, if the processes are in place, then definitely there are ways of avoiding it. But usually we have seen that because at the customer side also the team keeps changing. So there is not a single entity to keep track of all these things. So to have a framework to make sure that there is at the least level of technical depth possible and a reusable framework, it's really important that at what level you are engaging. If we are going to a customer and start getting engaged to them at this level of project who was already running at 10 years, we don't really just start on this project directly. I mean, there is a first way of looking at what exactly implementation has been done and how much we can reuse rather than just start building on top of it. There are actually processes around it, and we have to define the processes to govern these kind of policies. So in a nutshell, I would say that have a very defined processes to make sure that we are using the existing implementations rather than creating the duplicate ones, like your utility classes, your helper methods, all those things.
Got it. So basically what you're saying is understand what's important and start from there.
That's right, because we have seen the projects where the same level of same code is there that is doing the same purpose multiple places, and same fields are there on the same objects kept with a different name, capturing the same data. So that's really important that the things are documented there. When you are doing a new implementation, then make sure that this is already in place and build it a way that can be reused by the future implementation. If you're not the next partner, they should be able to reuse what you have built.
Awesome. And with so that, let me move to that kind of gives me precedence to move on to the next question. So with Lightning and with the support of JavaScript in Salesforce, we have seen the rise of managed package applications that are now integrating with Angular or the React or the Redux framework. So so Daniel, this question is primarily to you. What is the role of static resources, or how is the role of static resources changing in a managed package development?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think there's the traditional way that we use static resources, which is still there, will continue to be there. And this is, including jQuery or something like this. But yeah, the new way of using these, I think, is sort of an alternative to Lightning. So maybe there's some advantages over things like React and Angular. One that I hear is for extremely complex UIs, React actually has better performance. Maybe the performance of Lightning isn't quite acceptable. So you're seeing some development shops, some ISVs they're actually building their application, say on React, and this is like a very different development flow. So what they might do is they might have a Visualforce container. They might be pointing to something like a localhost, ngrok directory that's where they're sort of editing unpackaged, JavaScript. And as they save this, they're seeing the results, come through in real time. But then when it comes time to package, they'll do like a Webpack flow on this. And now they'll be pulling in the static resource from Salesforce instead of from localhost. So it's kind of a different development methodology. And I think, the jury's out in terms of what will be the life of this. But I know like one challenge is you're building like the majority of your application and you've got like 5 megabyte static resource limits. So ISVs are hitting this problem. So I would say that's probably putting somewhat a damper on this type of development. People have to break up their application into, it's more complex packaging development flow because they really don't want to break it up. They really want to package the whole thing into one resource. And also as Lightning improves, improves in performance and sort of you get a bigger talent pool ramped up on this, you may see people are doing less, React and Angular on Salesforce and maybe more Lightning. But definitely this is, it's definitely pretty prevalent. And I think the idea of that is basically you sort of have packaging on top of packaging. So you'll have all these folder structures with, all your resources for your project, and those all get bundled up in Webpack, and maybe you're doing some things on them like minify and uglify, and that gets put into one static resource. Now that is going into your managed package as well. So it's almost like you have sort of two CI/CD processes that to finally deliver this thing into a Salesforce managed package.
You're absolutely right, Daniel. So I'm kind of seeing this evolving in our customer base where people have an implementation for Angular and people have an implementation for Salesforce. And we keep getting requests, for a CI/CD tool such as AutoRABIT to support both the implementations where we can, as you said, we can build, minify the Angular and add it to the static resource and then package it along with the managed package. So I do see a rise in this, but where do you think this would end? What do you see the future of the Webpack style of development as?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, I know Salesforce DX is making it easier to have sort of a core set of CI/CD, if you want to call them like scripts, because we've got all the little granular tools at our disposal now to do, between DX command line and open source world. It's easier to build that whole pipeline, but really I don't think anybody knows for sure where this is going. There's too many variables in the future to predict. Nobody knows where technology is going. There could be something new that blows Lightning, React, and Angular out of the water that people start moving to. We've seen a lot of these things sometimes come out of nowhere and start disrupting quickly. But I think it's nice that we have ways to do both. I mean, if Lightning's not meeting your needs, you still have this alternative, Salesforce is alternative framework friendly. They've even got ways to host these things. You can in a Visualforce container or a Lightning container. So they're definitely, they're not fighting this. They're allowing the open source world, the JavaScript frameworks to coexist within Salesforce, but I can't predict what the popularity is going to be of, Lightning. I feel like right now the momentum's good on the Lightning side. Maybe years back, you saw more people doing Angular and React. I feel like maybe now you see less of that, but all these different players are moving at different rates, and plus there's like unknowns out in the market. So it's just nice to have support for all these things. But yeah, I wish I could predict which one will come out. I would invest in them if I could.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So let's move on to our next question, which again is very critical for managed packages. So one of the core things that once you develop a managed packages, again you put that on App Exchange and people install it. But this is not more of from the team that is developing managed package, but this is for the team that is using managed packages. So probably Vikram, you could contribute a lot here. So when you deploy a managed package, because of the multiple versions that a managed package will have across different environments, could be your development, could be a QA stage, how do you manage the deployment of a managed package and make sure that when it hits production, it is satisfying, or you're able to check off all the points on your sheet saying that this deployment of this managed package is successful. And also to add, what are some of the best practices in order to manage the development, the custom development that happens on top of a managed package?
Prashanth, is this question for me?
Yes, Vikram. So basically, what do we do about managed packages when we deploy them? Yeah.
Yeah, there was a disconnect in the voice for the first question. Can you please repeat that?
Sure, of course. When you're deploying a managed package, so there are two types of deployments, right? One is where people download the managed package from App Exchange, and just install it, which is also equivalent to a deployment. Second thing is where you're working on a managed package, you're building some custom code on top of a managed package, and now you want to install it across your multiple environments. What are some of the best practices in order to move a managed package from development to production?
Okay, so I think based on my experience, Prashanth, I've never seen deploying the managed packages to other environments. So the typical approach that we follow is we have the separate environments like dev, QA, UAT, and production, and a couple of other environments. So we install the managed package first from App Exchange in all of these environments, typically at the same time. We do the development on the dev environment, and if there is a good CI process built in, any changes that you do on top of managed package is actually moved as part of the same deployment that you are doing for any other components. Because in the target environment QA, this package is already there. So all these components that you have built or modified, it goes as the same process. Either you are sending it through change sets or Ant, or you are using your CI process. We don't really deploy the managed package. So managed packages are installed, and the one thing we need to make very sure is that the managed package version is same in all the environments. So because dev is the very active environment always, where everyone is working and testing the things on the managed package. If we have upgraded that package, make sure that the package version is same in all the environments. Otherwise, if any component in dev is referring the managed package, so in that XML file, the version number is there, which will be a mismatch in the target environment, because in the Q environment or the target environment, it's still referring to the old version. I only see this one important thing to make sure that all the environments have the same App Exchange version number, and all the rest of the deployment goes to the usual route. Maybe Dan can add more if I missed anything here.
Yeah, I could add a couple of small things. I know one, unfortunately, sometimes when you deploy managed packages, it will fail. And that's something to keep an eye out for, is like, what if you've added so many custom fields to the standard object, and now the managed package is trying to add more and the object can't support it. So some things to realize is that even though it's very easy to install a managed package in terms of you just, go to this URL and click next, but sometimes they do fail. I think that's one issue. Another thing is, making sure you have licenses for them. If you're installing a package and you haven't paid for the licenses, sometimes you'll have it installed, but you can't actually use it. And then also, it's pretty exciting with DX. You can now have the package installation be part of, command line, part of your CI/CD flows. So I think that's pretty cool. The idea of deploying, installing managed packages can be automated nicely now.
Right. I think we had great insights from both Vikram and you. I think I've learned something where when you try to install a managed package, the installation actually skips the running of this, so it makes it easy for the installation of the managed package to be easier. So thank you guys. So moving on. So one of the other things when you're building a managed package applications is how do you put governance on top of your application. So one of the one of the challenges that the Salesforce community is facing is the battle between the profiles and permission set. And when you're essentially building another package, you would want to put some permission set inside your package so that it can manage the access controls. So, Daniel, what are your thoughts on what are some of the do's and don'ts in terms of managing access controls?
Yeah, so this is actually at the top of my mind. I did a presentation on this at Dreamforce. So I think, your best, if you can only pick one thing, probably your most common thing you'll see is permission sets. Profiles are a little trickier. Basically, they're just harder to manage when they spin out of control. You only get one profile, but you can layer on many permission sets. So that gives you that nice modularity of layering in things. But I think those start to break down pretty quickly. So when you have a very complex application built on Salesforce, what you'll start to notice is that you can put permission sets in your package as a template for people to use, but they won't really meet anybody's requirements. And this is because the way different businesses cross-cut their functionality for who does what is going to be different. So they'll probably need these two permission sets plus half of another one plus a whole new custom one for something they wrote. So when you end up putting these permission sets in your package, especially for large complex packages, they don't meet anybody's requirements. They're just kind of wasted effort in that regard. And the customer has to put in a lot of effort, or professional services has to put in a lot of effort to create a permission set that will let the users actually use the application properly. So what we've started migrating towards more is custom permissions, and that's a nice alternative. There's still you still assign the custom permissions via permission set, but you're not worrying so much about field level security like you are in a permission set. You're worried more about maybe performing an action on an object, and then all of the field level security you need will be handled with that custom permission, and your custom Apex code is going to run in system mode. And so when you write your package, you're referring to the custom permission instead of checking for field level security. So I think those are the main ways. I don't know if this question is around feature enablement also, but that's more of like, does a customer get the ability to do this portion of the product or not? Did they pay us the money? We'll turn that feature on. I think maybe we'll have another question on that later on, but if not, that's, I think feature level is a nice way to manage this, because this lets the builder of the application turn features on and off remotely for the customers. That's a pretty powerful feature.
I absolutely agree. So the question was kind of both sides. How do you manage permissions from a feature perspective and from a usability perspective? And I think you've answered both of them. Vikram, any best practices that you have come across in your experience when you want to just between profiles and permission set when you're building out an implementation for any of the customers? So what is your style of approach on this?
So typical thing is, right, we all know what's the purpose of profiles and permission sets. So we go with the basic profiles for the major set of the users and go with the permission sets for any additional permissions that we need. The interesting thing I would like to talk about here is the feature enablement. So that's the specific to managed packages. The same thing is, I'm actually a big fan of it, of the enabling or disabling features in the normal implementations as well. So we have seen in many implementations that there are scenarios where, I'll give you an example, where there is a single log used by multiple business units for some reason, because it was decided initially and it's difficult to move to multi-org, or maybe the cost is the reason, or whatever is the reason. Feature enablements is a very good way of enabling an action or anything. It's not just very specific to managed package. So we have been doing these same things in the implementations where some action is there for the first business unit, and we can control it using the custom permissions, as Daniel was saying, or a custom setting or a custom metadata type. So these are the things which we have started actually exploring and using in normal implementations as well. So it's a great thing.
I totally agree. So talking about access controls now, since we've moved on to users, if I'm a provider of a managed package and if I'm running a shop, I would like to know what is the most used feature that I have, and I'd like to see, what is the button that my users click the most in my application. So, are there any ways, if there are, how can you track the usage analytics or telemetrics on your managed package?
Yeah, this is so key. Anyone who is building a product to improve their product, they really need to be collecting a lot of data on how people are using this. You can talk to your users and you can watch them use the product, but the application itself should be able to report on what everybody's doing. You shouldn't have to ask the users what they're clicking on. They might not even tell you the right answer anyway. You should be able to have analytics on this. And unfortunately, in the Salesforce world, I would say they're kind of lagging behind in terms of what people are building in other ecosystems. And maybe there's a good reason for this. They've given us this usage metrics, which is something that customers don't need to opt into. The platform tracks it automatically. And this shows us, how much they're using our custom objects and how much they're using our page views. So it doesn't even show Lightning per se. It's more geared towards Visualforce. But the benefit of this is it's very limited on what it shows. The benefit there is there's no privacy issues. There's no data security issues. So you don't have to ask the customer to enable this. And the trust factor is still there. So I guess that's kind of good. But on the downside, you can't make your product as good as you possibly could. Let's say if you were like fully instrumented with Google Analytics and you could view like heat maps of where people are clicking on the page. So I'm hoping to see a shift towards this. Like you see Google Analytics used like on Salesforce communities where you have more like an external, almost like a web portal. In fact, that's a platform feature. But in managed packages, I think because of the privacy concerns, it's the customer's org and they've got your app installed into their org. How much can you cross over into other areas of their org that you shouldn't see? So I think there's been very slow adoption with Google Analytics. And I've talked to Salesforce security team about this, and I think you can put Google Analytics in your package. There's nothing specifically preventing you from doing that, but I've never seen an ISV. I'm sure there must be some, but I've never seen an ISV actually go through with it to the end and pull it off. So I think it's still in the phase where people really want it, but most people don't have it yet. So I'd like to see this get better, and I think we'd see ISV products really improve if they could get better metrics.
I absolutely agree, and this is one of the areas that we are also fighting an upward battle. We do want to understand what are some of the core features the community in general likes, so that we can give it, we can build more upon it, we can give it more power. So Vikram, any insight from you in terms of how do you, so I'm pretty sure you are using the reporting and dashboard features of Salesforce to understand the mileage of a particular feature. But any special hacks that we can know in terms of how do you track your usage analytics?
Yeah, I would say the only few. Oh, I'm sorry. Was this for Vikram?
Yeah.
I'll continue.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll continue. Okay, then I'll go on from here. Yes, Prashanth. So as Daniel said, this Google Analytics, you are capturing the user information on the Visualforce pages or any other typical resources we have, reports and dashboards. Other than that, if we are just talking about hacks, then we have seen the requirement. The customer really wants to see the usage of who is going and accessing the confidential customer data. They want to report on who has open time. So this level of information out of the box Salesforce, you don't really get any reports on who has viewed your data. So actually captured as a hack. You built a small component in your Visualforce page, as in when anyone opens that, or in the Lightning experience, then this component just actually makes an entry in a custom object. It's audit data, audit tracking purpose for the. So on this object, you can have the reporting done. Other than that, yeah, I would say that most of these scenarios are actually covered by your standard Salesforce reports, your user adoption and all those things. A lot of standard reports actually Salesforce as part of this starter packages for lightning adoption. That's actually, in most of the cases, that's enough. Over to you, Dan.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think the custom object method of tracking your usage analytics, I think something like that could also be perhaps put in a managed package. But from a getting insights and getting dashboards using Google Analytics would be awesome in Salesforce. So I hope Salesforce is listening. All right, so moving on. So we've been talking a lot about Salesforce DX and second generation packaging. So Daniel, can you give us your thoughts in terms of one, where do we get started in terms of building managed packages on second generation, and how do you see this evolve, and what are some of the things that we need to keep in mind when we're doing this? Because this is a beast.
It is. And first thing to point out is when we talk about sort of this DX and new packaging, I just want to point out there's sort of two pieces to it. And one is the unlocked packages, which are generally available. And these are geared more towards like customers. And this is kind of getting customers that don't care about protecting their intellectual property, but they do want a modular way of developing and deploying and managing their code. So there's that. And I don't think we're going to talk too much about unlocked packages because we're more interested in this webinar in managed packages. So these second generation managed packages actually aren't generally available right now. They're still in beta, but this is a lot of the exciting stuff that we're kind of getting away from this dark art of things like the packaging org, the patch org. if you're ISVs, you know what the patch org, or even these branching orgs, which I believe are kind of been retired now. And this is being replaced with, not this thing that's more familiar to us. So it's not like this, who has the login to the patch org? We need to fix this customer, but it's more like, okay, our CI or CD can handle this for us via the command line stuff. So I think it's going to give us the ability to easily be more agile with our package structure. And there's a lot to this. Part of it's around the DX tooling. And this is like, these are like for developers building the managed package. And this isn't the actual the final step of doing the package, but it's just as important. So I think the DX format of the metadata that's more granular is going to make it easier for developers to merge their changes, before you package. And, I think the ANT scripting was a little bit arcane and people didn't quite understand it. I think the DX command line stuff is going to be much nicer. You can really do somewhat similar things. DX just does it way more efficiently. But then the actual process of doing the package itself. So this stuff's going to all be command line based. So you're going to have this tooling, because every package, every org is kind of its own snowflake. So you don't want to give like this one solution. You want to give people all the tools they need to do what's right for them. So I think, an example of a workflow might be maybe you want to have second generation packaging, build a lot of beta packages before you finally upload it or something like that. Or maybe you want to upload every package that you build, but DX gives you all the command line tools to do that. So I think that's the biggest thing, is not relying on this, package org, patch org, branch org, but giving all that same functionality from the command line so people can put it together however they want as part of their process to build something really efficiently for themselves. And I think, just one anecdote there, working at Canandy, I know our release manager there would never be able to get any sleep because he would always have to like manually log in to the package org to click the upload button and monitor it. So getting away from that kind of weirdness and getting into where, your CI solution can kick these things off and monitor them and people can actually get some sleep. And I think I think it's going to make a lot of people's lives a lot easier.
Yeah, that's actually what I think the Salesforce community needs to hear in terms of the challenges that are out there and the solution to it. So Vikram, in your in your implementation cycles, have you come across people who want to move into Salesforce DX and kind of want to adopt the second gen packaging?
Yes, Prashant. So with all the great features that DX brings, we all understand that it's the next level thing. The challenge, I'll tell you that the challenge that we see in adopting the DX is it's very technical because it's all command based. So it's so in a project, right? When you're doing an implementation, it's very important that each and every member who is contributing to the implementation adheres to the release management process. It's not like two developers are actually using source control and two are using change sets for the deployment. So everyone has to adhere the same process. The challenge that we see is because DX is too technical, it requires a good amount of, technical knowledge to understand the commands, command line commands, and run it and execute and create a scratch or create a script to deploy the components. The functional guys in the projects, the ICs, implementation consultants, so they find it difficult. So there is a big disconnect because of this. So we try to keep it, we are trying to keep away from DX for now until we have a better way of managing these things and have a better, like some interface or anything like that. So right now, the practice that we follow is we don't really go towards the DX in our release process. Even if we are having a very robust CI process, we are using the perfect, all the CI tool and all the source controls. We stay away from the DX for now.
Right, so it's great that we are able to talk about vision and the actual reality that we are in and where we want to go into. So it's great to, again, I just want to stress on the fact it's just great to have two sides of the world and in between me questioning you two in terms of understanding it. We are running short of time, so I'm going to just combine my last two questions into one question. So I know a lot of developers that are out there who have an idea and who want to build managed packages or applications that they can host on App Exchange. So any insight or any tips that that I can get from you for these budding developers who want to make it big?
I can go first here.
Go ahead.
Is my voice audible?
Yeah.
Okay, so quick thing is that based on the experience you have got on the projects, right, you'll realize that what actually is the idea. I mean, the ideas, where do you get on? Either you get these ideas on the projects you're working on, the platforms help, Salesforce help. So these ideas actually is a great starting point for you to start thinking about creating a, at least it can be a utility package. I mean, it's a small, it can be as small as helping in the lead assignments. So I think that you should, first of all, you should not be really bothered about if the same package is there already there on the App Exchange. If you have this idea, and go to App Exchange, see how many similar products are there, look at the reviews. That will actually tell you that what's missing in their packages. All the bad reviews will tell you what's missing in their packages. So maybe you can create a consolidated list of the similar ideas, that these are the good things they are giving and what they are not giving. So you can build the same on the same idea on top of it. So I really think that you can start from as small as creating a utility app with as big as creating a Steelbrick app.
Great. Daniel, anything from you?
That was really good. I think what I want to add to that is I would encourage people to do it. Like, don't hesitate, because it seems like it's a big milestone, and maybe there's some fear. And then once you cross that, you'll realize it's not as hard as you thought, and this will open up a whole new world of, basically world into entrepreneurship for people. So if you have some idea, I would just say go do it.
Perfect. And so this is the same message that the community events that Salesforce has, starting from Dreamforce, as big as Dreamforce, to local community events. And this is the same message that Salesforce keeps giving. And that's how we have a very vibrant App Exchange community. So if I can stretch you guys for another minute, we have some excellent questions. So Danny, I'm going to start with you. So I have a question from Mr. Bharat Chen, who is asking us, is it okay to still use list type custom settings for managed packages now, or is it mandatory to use custom metadata?
List type custom settings. Yeah, I don't think it's mandatory. I think it's just recommended. Basically, if you use the list type, how do you populate it, right? So maybe there's something in your code that populates it, or the user has to populate it manually. I don't know that, I don't know, I haven't heard any talk of them removing it. I just have, heard that they're pushing people towards custom metadata. So I would say my recommendation is try to use custom metadata unless there's some reason you can't. But, right off the bat, like custom metadata doesn't solve all the problems. There's some limitations of it, so they can't really force you to use it. So yeah, I think it's okay, but try to use custom metadata unless there's a strong reason not to.
Right. I think in the new, if you create a new org, the list custom setting is by default disabled, which is a clear indication that Salesforce is moving towards custom metadata. And we all know the benefits of metadata type.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're nudging us for sure.
Yeah, I think the idea is to move into custom metadata first from seeing the multiple usage, from seeing, because being part of multiple implementation, being in AutoRABIT, so that kind of gives me a sense of where people are headed. And I think custom metadata, as you both said, is where I think the money is. So the next question is from Al Tejwani. Any suggested/recommended for issues tied around support dynamic SQL, no shadowing option? Any? I think there is an idea. There is an idea posted on Idea Exchange on this. Any idea between you both? I have no clue.
Yeah, I think this is just a known issue. I think this is where the query optimizer doesn't pick the right namespace when you're issuing a query. So I know there's some workarounds. I think I've seen them on Stack Exchange, but I think the good news here is we have people at Salesforce now, Chris Peterson and these folks who are interested in fixing these things. So I think for now it's just kind of a known issue.
Cool. Yeah, so I see that this idea has a lot of words, and hopefully Salesforce is looking into it. So let's move on to the next question. So can a managed package recognize validation rules on shared objects, example account, so that test classes run without errors? For example, to copy my validation logic in a custom metadata.
Yeah, this is interesting. So this is asking if the managed, so I think, is this sort of like dependency injection where the managed package is looking to things that customers have put in their orgs, sort of like maybe customers are implementing an interface in the managed package. Is that kind of what that's what it sounds like?
So basically so this question is from Alexander. So how do you, the question is more about how does a managed package recognize a validation rule on an account object so that test classes run without error. So if there is dependency on that validation rule in that managed package, how do you copy the validation logic into a custom metadata?
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I fully understand, but I partially understand the question. It might be maybe this is something Alexander and I can follow up with offline, but it sounds like, some things I could think of are like you could put some try-catch stuff in your test class to look for these validation errors. Another thing, I'd be curious why you don't have to run the tests in the managed package. So I'm wondering if it's maybe the reverse, is like you have to run the tests in the org on your custom code, and maybe they're triggering some error from a managed package. So I'd like to dig into that, what's the use case for running the tests in the first place? Because you obviously have to run your tests in your package org to upload a package, but you don't have to run them to install the package. Although you can install the package and then select to run the tests. But most people don't do this. So I think I'd probably need a little more back and forth with Alexander. Oh, I see here. This says it's a validation rule on account. Yeah, so these standard objects are the common interface between custom code, between multiple vendors and their managed packages. So yeah, this is things like accounts are very common for things to interact with each other, maybe in ways that the vendors didn't expect. The short answer is it probably doesn't matter. Like if your managed package is having a failing test, then it's okay. This says in test classes, even on managed packages. Yeah, ideally they would run without issues in the org, but the bottom line is, yeah, the builder of the managed package isn't responsible for like the infinite number of validation rules the customer could write to make their tests fail. I would say in that case, the customer is more responsible, but it could be a little bit of a joint effort between the ISV and the customer, like through customer support. And ultimately, if the customer is doing something very, very valid and it's an oversight on the ISV's part, they'll have to change their package to not cause that, failing test. And maybe it's something where they actually build it into their package, like, as part of their QA orgs, or even part of the package itself to where they're looking for this, so they find it before the customer does. But yeah, let's discuss more offline, Alexander. If you can reach out to me, we can go back and forth a little bit on this one.
Yeah, so we can definitely leave our Twitter IDs, and I think there is another question in this. So we have one final question before we call it off. So related to this subject, is there a good practice to make automatic upgrades between two versions of a managed package? Daniel, I think that's very interesting.
Between two versions, I think that's the interesting part. So in general, automatic upgrades, they're the ideal, right? Software as a service, it's just always the latest, greatest without you having to worry about it. The problem is in the real world, upgrades break things. And a lot of times businesses want to test these upgrades before they put them in production. So I think that's where we kind of haven't made the full jump to automatic push upgrades in all cases. Even Salesforce hasn't made this, right? They give us an early view in our sandbox so we can test everything and hopefully scramble and fix it before it moves to production. So that's an issue that probably isn't going to go away in the short term, because there's infinite ways you can customize your org, and the only way to really know if things are going to work is by testing when you upgrade. But I think in terms of between the two versions, I think this is becoming more of the decoupled approach. So maybe the packages can actually work. Maybe you can originally create two versions, say 1.0. Maybe you can upgrade one of the packages to 2.0 and have it, have these two things be, backwards compatible and forwards compatible, to where they don't have hard dependencies on each other. Maybe there's new features or bug fixes in the latest version, but if you don't upgrade, you're not forced to upgrade. So I think allowing for different packages to be on different versions is a huge step to allowing the push upgrades on both versions to work in whatever order you want.
Great. Yeah, I think that kind of is something for the future. To have a support for both versions in a package. So yeah, great. So thank you guys. I'm sorry if we had to go a little about time, but I think this was an excellent webinar in terms of giving insights from both sides of the world to understand how we have stuff that we talked about for experienced developers and for budding developers in terms of what are the things that they need to kind of take care of when they're building applications or building managed packages. So thank you very much for coming on this webinar and making our day great. Thank you, Vikram. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Please reach out if you have any more questions. Sorry I didn't have a chance to get to all of them.
For the attendees, we put Daniel's and Vikram's Twitter IDs on the chat, so please feel free to DM them with any of your questions. Trust me when I say this, they are the most helpful people when it comes to answering questions on the social media. So once again, thank you everyone. Have a nice day.